Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best champions to one trick or best champions to main for right now in this patch. So this video is going to consist of a lot of champions that have a very high skill ceiling. Now what I mean by this is, if you put a lot of time into these champions and you spam games on them, then you're really going to notice a difference between a player that has played very little of one of these champions and then a player that has played multiple games and they've played them for a very long time. And then one more thing to note is that this list isn't really opinionated. It's mainly based off of which champions are being played the most, or which champions have been most successful for the top ranked challenger players this season, and which champions they've been playing to get up to the highest ranks on the ladder. So with that being said guys, let's get started. So we're going to start down in the support role for this video. I'm going to recommend two champions for support, and they're going to be Bard and Thresh. So Bard's a champion that most high elo challenger players have played a lot of, or they do have the champion in their champion pool. You will notice right now that the rank 2 player on the EUS server is actually a Bard main, and Bard is his most played champion. He's rank 2 right now with around 1000 LP, and a lot of other support mains also do have Bard right now as one of their most played champions. Bard is a pick that he's just got such a high skill ceiling. If you put countless games into this champion and you can really learn the ins and outs of him, then you can perform super well. He's one of the only supports that I actually think you can solo carry on. If you can hit good ultimates with Bard, if you can get good stuns off with him, I think he's just a really strong support champion to carry with. Your damage that you have with the champion is also insane. Once you do end up picking up a lot of your meeps, you can basically 1v1 the enemy mid laner, or you can do a lot of damage with this champion. So he's definitely a very strong support pick if you are looking for a really good carry champion to put the time into. My number 2 pick here is going to be Thresh. So very similar to Bard, Thresh is a champion that most of the high elo challenger players, they do have Thresh as one of their most played support champions. He's just a very strong carry support champion because he has so much potential in his kit. His lantern ganks, his ability to just single-handedly carry a game with his hooks in the laning phase, and his ability to save his AD carry or just save his teammates with his lantern. He's got some of the best peel as well for any support champion. So I just think that if you put a lot of time into Thresh, then he can be one of the best supports in the game for sure. Now for the AD carry role here, I'm going to give 3 champions because these were the 3 picks that I've found do have a lot of success in the higher elos and for players that do spend a lot of time on these champions. Now the first one here, it shouldn't really be too much of a surprise, but it's going to be Draven. So Draven's potential to snowball the early game is probably the best for any AD carry, and right now I think that Draven overall is just one of the strongest ADs. So if you can play this champion really well and to his fullest potential, I just think he's probably OP right now in this patch. He's got such a good early game, he's got such a good snowball potential, and he's one of the only AD carries that can actually transition their lead from the laning phase like into other lanes and actually end up solo carrying a game. With other AD carries like for example Tristana or Caitlyn or Twitch, even if you do get a kill or two in the laning phase, I find that it's often harder to end up solo carrying a game if your top lane feeds or your mid lane feeds. Whereas with Draven, if you can get a few kills in lane, you're gonna basically one-shot any target with your axes. If you can just catch your axes continuously in team fights and pump out a lot of damage, then you're gonna be very successful on Draven. And then to put this into perspective right now, the rank 1 player on the Korean server does have Draven as his most played champion. So that just goes to show you that if you can play really good Draven, then you can climb really high and you can solo carry games with him. My number 2 AD carry here is going to be Kalista. So Kalista is very similar to Draven. Both of these AD carries have very strong early games and they have the potential to take over the game very early on. I think that if you're a good Kalista player and you can pair her up with an aggressive support, then your early game is going to be very strong and you should be able to win lane most games and transition that into objectives or into Dragon or Baron. If you do get ahead with her early game, it's very easy for you to take dragons or to take take an early Baron because of your Ren damage. Your Ren damage basically guarantees that you're gonna get Dragon or that you're going to get Baron. So if you find yourself constantly getting ahead as Kalista, then look to get a pink ward, tell your team to grab some pinks. If you're super far ahead, just go for that early Baron and end out the game very quickly. And then my number 3 AD carry pick here is going to be Twitch. So Twitch doesn't have the strongest early game that like Draven or that Kalista does, but he's a champion that is very unique in the sense that if you can get ahead in the early game and you can get a lead, then with your stealth from your Q, it just allows you to roam around the map and influence the map. He kind of becomes a second jungler in a sense because you can roam mid lane, you can roam top lane if you end up taking the bot lane tower, and you can actually end up getting your other lanes ahead by doing that. I think that's the one thing, or one of the things that differentiates an average Twitch from a really good Twitch player is his ability to just transition his lead into laning phase and go for roams with his Q and get his other lanes ahead too. So my number 1 pick for mid lane right now is going to be Cassiopeia. So Cassiopeia is here mainly because of her ability to pump out some of the most DPS for any mid lane champion. Now Cassiopeia, if you can play her well and you can consistently hit your Q with her in team fights, you're going to do super well on the champion. I think that Cassiopeia is definitely one of the highest skill cap mid lane champions, or she's a champion that you do need to put a lot of time on to be successful on her, just because if you can't consistently land your Q on her, then you're really gonna be just a sitting duck in team fights for the most part. You're not gonna contribute very much unless you can hit a good ultimate. But overall, if you get ahead with this champion in the early game, or you get a nice little snowball going for your team, then it should be very easy for a good Cassio player to close out the game and carry it. My number 2 pick here is going to be Aurelion Sol. Now the main reason why Aurelion Sol is here is because he's got some of the best shove for any mid lane champion, and he's also got some of the best roam for any mid lane champion. So combine those two things and this champion is just a really good pick for solo queue if you can play it well. I think that your ability to just snowball your side lanes and get your other lanes ahead is some of the best for any mid lane pick. And he also does have a very strong team fight. If you get ahead, you pump out a lot of AoE damage with Aurelion, so it doesn't really matter too much how well your team is doing. If you can just roam a little bit, get your team ahead, and you can get ahead yourself, then it should be very easy for you to win games on the champion. And then my number 3 pick here is going to be Talia, or Talia, however you want to pronounce it. So right now, Talia is a very similar pick to Aurelion Sol. She's got really good shove in the laning phase, and she's also got great roam at level 6 with her ultimate. So with Talia, you basically want to play it pretty much the same way as Aurelion Sol. Once you hit level 6, you shove the wave in, you look to go for roams with your ultimate, and you look to help out your side lanes. A good Talia player will just always constantly keep pressuring, keep shoving the wave in, and continuously look to go for roam plays and look to get her side lanes ahead. I think that with this champion, it's just very easy to get a really good snowball going in the early game if you can play her correctly. And then she's similar to Cassiopeia too, in the sense that her DPS damage with her Q, if ahead, is insanely good. If you can just fight in areas where you don't have any of your Qs or your worked ground down, then you're going to do a load of damage. You also do have good burst damage potential too, if you can consistently hit your WE combo. I think that's one thing that does differentiate an average Talia from a really good Talia player. I find that when I play Talia, oftentimes I can't consistently hit my WE combo off on the opponent, so it does limit what you can do with the champion if you can't hit that combo. But if you can shove and roam and you can also consistently hit your burst combo with her, then she's a very, very strong champion. And then for the jungle right now, these 3 picks that I'm going to recommend are the champions that pretty much every single high elo jungle main are playing right now, or they're playing at least 2 out of these 3 champions primarily. Now these picks are going to be Lee Sin, Nidalee, and Elise. So Lee and Elise are the 2 picks that pretty much every single high rank player has in their champion pool, and they're playing a lot of right now. Nidalee is a pick that you don't see as much, but you do see quite a few higher rank players also have Nidalee in their champion pool. And what makes these champions very strong if you put a lot of time into them is their ability to just get ahead in the early game. If you can play these champions early games well, then it's very easy for your team to just end the game very quickly. These champions aren't picks though that you can just pick up right away, because if you don't get ahead early with them, then you're just gonna get outscaled by most of the other junglers and you're not gonna have a very good time. But if you do have the knowledge on these champions and you put a lot of time into them, they're probably the best junglers that you can play because their early games are just super strong. And then for the top lane to round out the video, the number 1 pick right now is Jace. So Jace is a pick that pretty much every single high elo top lane main does have in their champion pool. Most players are spamming this pick right now in solo queue. It's just a very, very strong pick because it has very few lane counters. Its ability to get ahead in the early game and get a lead on his opponent is just very easy to do if you do have knowledge on the champ. Number 2 for top lane is going to be Fiora. So Fiora is probably one of the best, if not the best, side lane split pushing top laners that you can play right now in this patch. She's really, really good into any tank top lane pick. She's also good against most of the meta top lane picks right now. So she's a champion that if you can play well and you put the time into, then you can just solo carry because of your split push. If you can get ahead with her early game, the enemy team is going to have to send a few members top lane to deal with your split push. And if you can outplay with your W and just with the amount of damage that you can put out, then it can be very easy for you to carry games on Fiora. And then my number 3 pick here for the top lane to round it out is going to be Riven. So Riven has always been known as one of the champions that has one of the highest skill ceilings. With her animation cancels, you do have to put quite a lot of time into the champion to really play her to her fullest potential. You do see a lot of Riven players get very high up in the ladder. With the recent item changes to Death's Dance and to Guardian Angel, Riven is just an even stronger pick now. I think that she's one of the best top lane picks if you put a lot of time into the champion. With Death's Dance, it's a great rush item now on her, and then Guardian Angel as your 3rd item just makes her a super hard champion to deal with. So that is going to be all for this video. If you guys did enjoy, then please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, guys. Have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.